It is now 5:30 p.m. and I now call to order the Grand Island Public Schools Board of Education meeting. This is the April 17th, 2023 meeting. Notice of this meeting has been advertised in the Grand Island Independent, which is the district's designated method of giving notice of these meetings. We want those in attendance to know that copies of the Open Meetings Act are available at the entrance to the boardroom. If anyone in attendance is interested in addressing our board, you are welcome to do so. We simply request that you complete the appropriate form and turn it in to us so that you may be recognized during the requests to address the board part of our meeting. If you have not already completed this form, please see the staff person outside the entrance to this room. Public comment is welcome. We do ask that no signs be brought into the boardroom. Mrs. Dibbert, would you please call the roll?
Mr. McFarland?
Present.
Mr. Helinski?
Here.
Mr. Garcia Mendez?
Present.
Mr. Hawley?
Here.
Mrs. Wilson? Here. Mrs. Albers? Here. Mr. Sykes and Mrs. Jurgensen have given prior notice that they were going to be absent. Ms. Maudlin? Here.
Thank you. Now, reading of the mission statement. The mission: every student, every day a success. In educating students, we teach hearts as well as minds. Student commitments. Within the school district of Grand Island, every student has access to high quality, culturally responsive, and engaging learning environments. Every student will develop literacy skills across disciplines. Every student is socially and emotionally equipped to thrive in school and in life. Every student will graduate as a college, career, and community-ready citizen. The first item on the agenda tonight is the consent agenda. The consent agenda to be approved is as follows. Item 4.1, meetings from the previous month's meeting. 4.2, acceptance of agendas from standing committees. 4.3, claims as submitted. 4.4, bid proposals as submitted. 4.5, staff adjustments as submitted. 4.6, treasurer's report as submitted. 4.7, policy. Under that, we have 4.7.1.3212, superintendent evaluation, final read. 4.7.2.8240, admission of exchange and foreign students, final read. 4.7.3.2110, powers and responsibilities of the school board, final read. 4.7.4.2111, board operating principles, final read. 4.7.5.2230, board committees, final read. 4.7.6.2216, Board of Education student member, first read. 4.7.7.4460, expense reimbursements, first read. 4.7.8.8822, student meal charge policy, first read. 4.7.9.8740, graduation requirements, first read. 4.8, surplus property listing. 4.9, change orders as documented. 4.10, approval of agenda as submitted. This is the consent agenda as published. Would anyone like to remove any items or add any items to the consent agenda? Seeing none, does anyone have a potential conflict of interest on agenda item 4.3? If so, please state the check number you will be abstaining from voting on. Mr. Garcia Mendez?
I will be abstaining from voting on check number 87747 on the agenda item 4.3. I approve all other items on the consent agenda.
So noted. Mr. Helinski?
I will be abstaining from voting on check number 88081 on agenda item 4.3. I approve all other items on consent agenda.
Ms. Malden?
I will be abstaining from voting on check number 87785 on agenda item 4.3. I approve all of the items on the consent agenda.
So noted. Ms. Albers?
I will be abstaining from voting on check number 88136. On agenda item 4.3, I approve all other items on the consent agenda.
Thank you. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as spoken.
I make the recommendation to approve all the consent agendas as submitted.
Seconded by Ms. Albers. You may vote at this time. Motion passes. Item number 5.0. Special recognition. 5.1, honor students who earn gold keys in the Scholastic Art, excuse me, that just jumped on me, awards at the Grand Island Senior High. Why is that doing that? Okay, I apologize. My screen is skipping. All right, so do we have Miss Mickey Nuss to come speak?
Good evening. Alrighty. Hello, my name is Mickey Noose, and this is Casey Lammers, and we are both art teachers at Senior High. Tonight we are here to honor the amazing gold key artwork that was done by our students that were able to be here tonight. But first I want to tell you a little bit about what Scholastics is. And Scholastics is the Art and Writing Awards that is hosted by Omaha Public Schools. It is a juried competition, and it is judged by amazing artists from all over Nebraska. And so awards are broken down into honorable mention, silver key, and gold key. This year we had 12 honorable mentions, 6 silver keys, and 6 gold keys. They did very, very well. Selected artworks go on to Omaha, and they are shown from the months of February and March, and they are up there the whole entire time. Yeah, all gold keys, so all of these guys had their artwork go on to be nationally recognized and chosen to see if they get into that, and we will know that sooner. But yeah, so here is the artwork. Like I said, we had 12 honorable mentions, 6 silver keys, and 6 gold keys. So very first one, we have Cindy Garcia. She did a bust. It was made out of clay. Calissa Littlejohn, a self-portrait done in graphite. Angela Wynn, a self-portrait that was done in ink pen, emotional color. Aspen Poltak, a mask that was made out of mixed media cardboard and wire and glue. Amy Smith, this is a graphite drawing that was done of a classmate sitting in class. And actually this one was also chosen to be hung in the governor's residence for the entire summer. And then Ebony Shigeru. This is an oil painting. There you are. Very, very good. Do you guys have any questions?
So at this time, what we'd like to do is to present certificates to you recognizing this outstanding achievement. So Cindy. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Calissa.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Angela. Congratulations. Aspen. Congratulations, Amy. Congratulations to you and Ebony.
Thank you.
So, great work, super job of representing the school district in, you know, one of those areas that we don't get to recognize a lot. And so, outstanding work. So, congratulations to each of you, and I think what we would like you to do right now is make your way up to the center. We're gonna do some pictures. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Come on up.
Mr. Gilbertson, you want to go up
All right, you guys gotta crowd together now.
Yeah, get together, get friendly. Okay. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Family members, if you'd like to get photos, come on up. Let's do it. All right. One more. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. All right, wonderful.
Mr. McFarland? Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Ms. Nuss? Sorry. No, it's not a problem. I was just curious what grade all the students were in.
Okay, so Amy Smith is a senior, Aspen is a senior, Ebony is a senior, Angela is a senior, and then Calissa is a 10th grader, and Cindy is a 10th grader.
Thank you. And are those of you that are seniors, are any of you going to study art? No?
Ebony should.
Yeah.
I think they all should.
At least take some electives, maybe, if it works out.
They did amazing. I'm very proud of them.
Well
all.
done. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, campus highlights, item number 6.1, the teammates update. Unfortunately, Miss Nancy Jones is ill tonight, so we're going to go ahead and skip section 6.1, the teammates update. And we'll move on to item number 7, request to address the board. Dr. Dexter, do we have anybody? None. Okay, thank you. Okay, information items. Item number 8.1, I'd like to introduce Chief Kevin Denny, our newly appointed Grand Island Police Department Chief of Police. Mr. Denny, the podium's yours.
Thank you very much. I would say that my lack of artistic ability was one reason I became a cop, probably. So we had a template. You had to draw little cars and stick figures and stuff like that. So, you know, I needed a template just to do that. But Mr. President and board members, I appreciate the opportunity to address you tonight. I just wanted to give you a little information about myself, my background, especially as it pertains to schooling, the state of the police department as well, where we are right now, and any questions you might have. So I just wanted to be brief, but give you some information on that. So I don't know if you picked up on any accent, but I am from Texas. I spent about 30 years in law enforcement in Texas, and I'm happy to be here in Nebraska. It's been a great whirlwind of 4 months, but it's been wonderful. I've been enjoying getting to know the police department and the community. But my family will be up here in June. My wife, Tessa, is a stay-at-home mom right now, but she's normally a school teacher, 7th grade school teacher. And we have 4 girls, 2, 4, 9, and 14. So they'll be in the school districts up here. 2 of them at least will be in Grand Island Public Schools for sure. We're still working on the other one. Just a little background on me as far as schools go. I spent about 24 years with the Irving, Texas Police Department, and in so doing, I spent 3 years as a SRO supervisor. We had 20 school resource officers that we were over in a school district of a couple school districts of about 40,000 students. So it was pretty busy, and we were involved with rolling out the standard response protocol which you have here in this district as well, so I'm very familiar with that. After I left Irving, I retired from Irving, and I spent 4 years as a school district police chief. And so they have a lot of school district police departments in Texas, a lot of times because they overlap a lot of different jurisdictions. And so I was with the Red Oak Police Department, Red Oak ISD Police Department for 4 years. So I feel like I speak a second language when it comes to school district dialect that you all have. You all have a special words just like we do in the police department. And so I feel like I speak your language a little bit. After that, I went to Jarrell. I was a chief in Jarrell for a few years, and we started the SRO program in that small municipality. So it involved working with the school district for about a year and a half to gain that trust and respect, and then we stood up the school resource officer program in Jarrell. And lastly, I believe in being a lifelong learner, and I'm working on my PhD in criminal justice that is oriented toward school districts and how we can close the gaps between perceptions of safety and security and law enforcement components. So we'll be working on that. We have a great collaboration right now, but we'll be working on a tighter collaboration as we go forward. As far as the state of the police department goes, about 4 months ago, we were almost 20 people down. We've been doing a lot of intense recruiting over the last few months, and right now we're about 7 or 8 down. What that means is that toward the end of the year, we'll have functional capacity of those people that we're bringing in. So we'll be about 7 or 8 down functionally by the end of the year, and then I anticipate us to be at full staffing by this time next year or the summer of next year. So that will be good. So we'll gain about 25% of our staff over the next 12, 18 months. One of those priorities of mine as well is to staff the empty SRO position as soon as we can. So that is a high priority going into the next school year. And just in closing, I'd like to say that my involvement with the school district so far has been to participate in a lockdown just a week and a half ago or so at an elementary. And I was very impressed with how the elementary staff and the SROs work together. Just like to pass that along. It's right in line with what I'm used to seeing, and it was a high level, and it was taken very seriously, so I was very impressed with that. Some of the things that I've noted about this district so far that I'd like to pass on in this interaction here is that I really am impressed with the leadership, both at the board member level and superintendent and your principals. So you have good leadership in place, I believe, and you also have good policies that are oriented towards security. You can always tell how serious a school district is if you look at some of the policies that they have with regard to safety and security. And I think you have good policies. Is there room for improvement? There's always room for improvement. Incremental improvement is what we do all the time. But you're in a good place right now, in my opinion. And that said, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to talk in front of you. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to entertain them. If not, I'll be more than happy to talk individually at any time.
Mr. Linsky.
Welcome, Chief. I know you and I talked briefly about a couple weeks ago, but I didn't get to ask you this question, and I should have. But what attracted you here to Grand Island?
That's a good question. So my wife and I is at a point where I didn't have to take any more classes for my college courses, and our oldest is about to be in high school. And so this was a good time to look around and see what else is out there in the country. And believe it or not, Grand Island scored high on my list. I was looking around, and you always weigh cost of living, community, and education as mainly your top three. And as I kept looking into it and researching it and getting to know the community and the council as I went through the interview process, it just felt right. You know, they're vetting me, but I'm also vetting them as well. And so that's why Grand Island scored high. I also like to put my kids in a car and drive them places and hold them captive for a while, go to Mount Rushmore or wherever, and you've got some other sites within the area that are a little closer than they would have been in Texas.
Ms. Malden.
Ms. Albers.
Thank you for being here and for making the effort to speak to us. We're just really happy that you're here, and we're looking forward to some great collaboration in the future.
Well, you all are in a good place right now with regard to the police department and your safety profile. But that, like I said, that's incremental improvement, and my full intent is to collaborate as much as we can going forward in the coming years. So thank you very much.
Mr. Fisher.
So you indicated that you'd have your staff fully in place by this time next year. Does that mean you're going to be able to then shift your focus to recruiting teachers?
That's right.
Good.
If we have any interest.
Yes is all we need.
Any interest and we can pass them on to the school district, we will. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief Denny. We sure appreciate having you here. Thank you. That was good. I was impressed.
We need all the help we can get.
That's right. Okay, the Health Occupation Student Association, HOSA, will present information on the health fair held at Gish on March 18th, 2023. So I have Mr. Schlegel and some HOSA students.
Well, and I've had the opportunity to work with this group over several years, and just so proud of what Mrs. Stone has done as a leader who teaches students how to be leaders. And when they approached me about, can you come meet with us? We want to do something. I was like, oh, what's next? But they just took it and ran with it, and just so proud of what they've done, and they're here to share what they've accomplished. Thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you all for having us. My name is Greg Schlegel. I'm the principal of the Academy of Medical Sciences, and you're not gonna hear much from me tonight. I'm just gonna introduce the incredible people behind me. Like Dr. Dexter said, we're here representing HOSA, which is the career student organization within the Academy of Medical Sciences. And I know it's in the slideshow, but this is a truly student-led organization with a great leader at the helm. Mrs. Stone, she's an English teacher at Grand Island Senior High. This is her first year leading the HOSA chapter. We had a great leader before. She elected to not come back as she's staying home with some youngsters, and I knew Megan couldn't say no, and so asked her to lead this group, and she's done a fantastic job. Mackenzie Skarka, she's the the vice president of HOSA. Mackenzie's a 12th grader. She's going to be attending UNL next year to major in pre-physical therapy. And then this is the president, Alejandro. Alejandro will be attending the University of Pennsylvania, majoring in medical anthropology. And so I'm going to turn things over to them and let them talk with you about HOSA.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having us. So as Mr. Schlegel said, I'm an English teacher by training. So anything within the medical sciences field has really been new to me, but I learned just as much from kind of facilitating HOSA as the students are learning and taking away. So this slideshow really is going to take you through some big moments that we've had just in the last few months, including the healthcare fair. But as we get going here, our leadership team, you've already been introduced to Alejandro and Mackenzie, and then McKenna is also our secretary and treasurer. So they have been leading our group this entire year. As soon as they were elected into their positions, they had ideas going. So anytime they had ideas, they came to me and pitched them, and I said, let's do it. Let's just see where we go with this. As Mr. Schlegel said, I don't say no very often because I like to see the possibilities and where we can go with that. So a little bit more about HOSA, Future Health Professionals. One of the big goals is developing, practicing, and refining medical leadership and teamwork skills to benefit students in their post-high school goals within the medical field. The activities that we've done this entire year and in the past and will continue to do include college visits, hosting speakers, going to conferences, prepping for competitive events, which you will hear more about in just a few minutes, and then also participating in community service, which you will also hear about soon. We meet twice a month during Islander time, which is our homeroom time, so we meet for about 40 minutes every couple of weeks. And like it's been said, this is a very student-led group, especially by our leadership team. And throughout the year, we've had about 40 members participating in one capacity or another. We do have a core group of about 15 to 20 students who do pretty much everything they possibly can. Whatever we say, hey, we're doing this, they sign up. So we have a really strong group moving forward.
Hello, everyone. So I was introduced. I'm Alejandro Amador. It's super nice to be here. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to come speak to you guys. So the first thing that I want to talk about is our state leadership conference. So this is kind of like the big thing that HOSA works towards every year. I have been in HOSA since my freshman year. It took a little bit of a stumble because of COVID and all that, but then junior year, once again, it picked up, and I was able to attend my first state leadership conference last year. So, you know, I went to that and I was hooked, and I wanted to come back and be able to lead HOSA and do this all over again. So the leadership conference is held at UNO, and this year it was from March 12th to the 14th. Basically what that is that we had about 12 students. It was supposed to be 13, but one of our students was sick, so she was not able to attend. We take our students to this event, and they actually get to compete in different medical events. So for example, I competed in health culture disparities in healthcare, something like that. And Kenzie did, what event did you do?
I competed in physical therapy.
Yep, and then we had other students compete in about up to 20 different events. So it was pretty cool. And then, so 5 of us qualified for the International Leadership Conference, which is going to be held in Dallas, Texas. Right now, we are working through the funding of all that and just the planning. But thanks to the support of our principals and our teacher and sponsor, we're very confident that that's going to happen. So we're really excited. Kenzie, if you want to tell them a little bit about the healthcare fair.
Yeah, so we hosted our first ever healthcare fair that was hosted by HOSA. It was on March 18th from 10 to 2. We had about 12 providers from local in our community, and they were super excited to be there. We heard great response from all of them, and they loved getting to know the families. And then we had about 40 families that came through and took benefits of those providers that were available that day.
Yeah, one of the really cool things was that we reached out to all of those providers, and we were the ones that were asking them if they wanted to come and participate in this. And everybody just had such a positive feedback and attitude about this. We hardly got any no's, and it was just a very amazing experience to see that so many people believed in our mission. To spread healthcare and spread awareness, because that was one of the big things that we were looking at. People aren't aware of the services that are here in our town. We are not, we're fortunate enough to have these services. People just don't know about them. So that was one of the big things that we were looking to do, was bridge that gap, and also just kind of allow the community to enter the school and just really, form that bond. So.
One great thing that we heard a lot about after our fair was all of our providers wanted to see this event continue for years to come. They think it is a great thing, and they look forward to seeing it in future years.
Yeah, so we're excited that it stays with HOSA. McKenna, who Ms. Stone talked about earlier, our secretary and treasurer, she is moving on to my position, the presidency, so I'm excited for her to take that over and just kind of grow the project. And then lastly, we already talked about ILC, but yep, we're very excited for that. Like I said, we have 5 competitors in 2 different events. So Mackenzie and I, as well as 2 other students, Magda and McKenna, are all part of the HOSA Bowl team. So you can think of that as a medical quiz bowl. And then one other student, Makaram, she placed very highly, and she's also going to be competing as a home health aide. So here we have a picture of all of our attendees. You can see many of us have medals. We also received the Barbara James Service Award. So this is for the healthcare fair that Kenzie was talking about. We both put in more than 100 hours into the planning and getting all the supplies and everything that we needed to make this happen. So HOSA was gracious enough to award us with this award. And you can see our whole chapter got a certificate.
Yeah, so this is our HOSA Bowl team. This is Alejandro, myself, McKenna, and Magda. We placed second, so a little bit deeper into that. We actually lost our first round, but then through a whole bunch of different competitions, we made it back up, and we ended up placing second in a
Yeah, it was
In
like
last round.
Last round, it was one difference of a question, so we were almost first. But you know, maybe next year.
Friendly competition.
Yeah, in the competition, I'm so proud of all of these members. We all put a lot of hard work in, and like Ms. Stone mentioned in some of our meetings, we do prep for these, and we just try to become as knowledgeable about HOSA Bowl as we can. Here you can see. On the left is the anatomage, and that's kind of like this huge, think of it like an iPad with a cadaver loaded on. So you can actually see all of the anatomical structures and stuff like that. And that's also an anatomy challenge. And last year we actually won first place. This year we were not quite as lucky, but that's okay. We still did great. And I know our students enjoyed that experience and being able to use the anatomage. And it's very, very cool. It would be amazing if our school district would ever get one. And then also Makaram, who I spoke about earlier, she is a sophomore. She did amazing. I am so incredibly proud of her. I know Ms. Stone, Mackenzie, we're so proud of her commitment to HOSA and to the events. So she won first place in home health aid, which is kind of like CNA, sort of. And then she also won these recognition events, which are sponsored by National Geographic. So she did amazing, and she is going to be coming with us to ILC to compete as a home health aide.
So some of the other awards that we won in cultural disparities and diversities, Alejandro got second place. In physical therapy, I placed third. Sports medicine, McKenna got fifth place. And then biotechnology, Magda got third place.
Yep, so everyone that is going to ILC placed in their own individual event, which I think is very, very cool. We are only allowed to compete in one event, so all of us will be doing HOSA Bowl, except Makaram, who will be doing her home health aid. But it's very amazing to see that we all did amazing on our own. And then here you can see a picture of all of us at state. It was a very, very fun time. Couldn't have done it with all of our support. Yeah, I think that's the last bit. So yeah, do you guys have any questions for us or anything that you'd want to talk on?
Mr. Helinski.
2 questions for you. Explain to me, you said competitions. You keep saying we place this place. What is that? Is that like a quiz bowl type thing, or is it an essay, or is it, hey, you come here, I'm gonna draw your blood? What is that?
So they're all very different. Some of them are skills based. For example, our student who did, let me see if I could find a picture of her. Can you see the cursor? So this is Fatima, and she competed in the CNA event, and for that what she had to do was take vital signs. So you actually do it on a person, and you record all that, and then they score you on how well you can go through the criteria. So for me, it was an online event, so that means that it's just an online test, and I just had to multiple choice it. But Kenzie's event, do you want to talk a little bit about yours?
Yeah, so leading up, a lot of our events that we competed in, we had to take a pre-test about a couple weeks before the event, and then once we got our rankings there, that's how they decided who moved on to compete at state. And then that is where we did actual skill-based competitions. And it was all very individual. You go into a room, private. They test you on one specific skill out of probably about 10 skills, and they're all chosen at random.
Yep, so you have to prep for all the skills that they allocate, but they only pick one. So it's a little bit more of a challenge like that. And then for HOSA Bowl, it's kind of like, imagine these 3 seats up here. You guys have buzzers, and someone's asking a question, and you answer in.
Okay. And then one more, just kind of a personal question for you, Alejandro, is UNMC and UNL and UNO have these great medical programs, nationally recognized. Why Pennsylvania, just out of curiosity?
So that's been a question for a while. The University of Pennsylvania is an Ivy League school, so I can say that definitely influenced my decision. But I also am very fond of the East Coast. I visited a couple times, and I just feel like it's such a medical hub, especially that Philly, Boston, DC area. So I can see a lot of opportunities for myself there. And unfortunately, UNL, UNO, and UNMC do not have my desired major of medical anthropology. So that was also a factor that I had to look at.
All right. Thank you. Congratulations to all of you.
Thank you so much.
Mrs. Albers.
So I wanted to talk about the health fair a little bit more. So what were some of the specialties you had there, or some of the providers that you had there? And then the second part of that is, what would you want to add next year?
So some of the providers that we had physical therapy doing muscle and balance testing. We had active family chiropractic. We also had GI dermatology. We had CHI doing colon cancer awareness, breast cancer awareness, and also dermatology awareness.
We had Choice Family Healthcare there, who was, raising awareness about STIs in our community, and also the Central District Health Department. They were partnered together. In case the board would like to know, that is a rising issue in our community, especially in our adolescent population. People are not being as safe as they can be, and so for me, that was actually where this project started. They were the first people that I wanted to reach out to, and as we kept moving forward with the project, we kept adding more people, but they were the very first ones that we were wanting to work with, just because we recognize that it's a huge issue in our community, and unfortunately, I don't believe it's talked about nearly as much as it needs to be.
And so what would you want to add next year, if anything? 'Cause you said you wanted to grow it. I was just curious.
So we did not have vision there this year, did we? Oh yeah, we want dental hygienist there if at all possible. We weren't able to get that this year. Vision was a little bit of a challenge. The vision van, something like that, they said they would be able to work with us in the future. They just didn't have the time to work with us this year. And then also the mobile diabetes unit, and they go around Nebraska and they do actual testing like on site. They were originally a partner and they were going to work with us, but due to staffing complications, they unfortunately had to drop out. So if we could get them to come back next year, that would be amazing.
Excellent. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mrs. Molden?
I just wanted to thank you guys for creating this and doing all this stuff. It's great. I had a chance to talk with you at Islander Extravaganza, and that was pretty great. So I think it's pretty awesome. We always need healthcare workers, so just keep going.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone? All right, well, thank you very much. Congratulations on your accomplishments. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you all so much.
Okay, item number 8.3, Grand Island Education Association Retirement, Years of Service and Scholarship Winners Celebrations. I have Miss Karma Lewandowski. Miss Lewandowski.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher, Dr. Dexter, Mr. McFarland, and Board of Education members. My name is Karma Lewandowski, and I am here on behalf of the Grand Island Education Association Communication and Publicity Committee. The GIA Communication and Publicity Committee is in charge of the retirement and recognition for years of service reception for the Grand Island Education Association members in May. And we also have added, we present our scholarship winners at that time as well. And I am here to cordially invite you to attend our celebration. The event is on Wednesday, May 10th. It is held at the Balls Reception Hall that is located at 213 North Sycamore Street. There's a social time beginning at 4 p.m. with a dinner and a limited presentation to begin at 4:30. And I have save the date cards for each of you. Does anyone have any questions for me? Short and sweet. Well, I hope to see you there. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Miss Lewandowski, for inviting us. We sure appreciate that.
I would love to see any and all of you there. Yes, I would. I was going to ask how do you want one for your phone as well? And I don't have it on your invite. I'm sorry, this was the first proof and I didn't look at it really closely. Please RSVP to me by May 2nd, if you would, if you plan to attend, so that we have an accurate account for the food. And we also get cupcakes from Redbird Bakery, which is rather delicious. And so please join us. We'd love to see any and all of you there. Thank you.
Thank you again. Okay, item 8.4, Geometry Adoption. We have Dr. Danielle Berman.
Good evening, everybody. I warned you in February when I came that I would be back And I don't show up in a black blazer. Like, we're going lime green. It's gorgeous outside. So we're ready to talk some math again. Super excited to be here. This needs analysis that's brought to you on the agenda, it's actually two parts. One part I'll present pretty extensively around the geometry adoption. The L4L committee got an additional look in the Algebra 2 portion of this. And I'm going to kind of take you on a little bit of a journey. I know we have a lot of new board members, and so what I'm going to do is actually walk back through some of the resource work that we've been doing that's kind of led up to this point, and why I'm coming to you today to talk more about math and to bring in some geometry resources. So in February, when I was here, I talked a little bit about our commitments, which are related to the Nebraska math practices, if you remember bringing those into play. And this was crafted by a group of preschool through 12th grade coaches, teachers, administrators who really dug in to figure out what are those common experiences we want all of our students to have. And these commitments really drive the professional development, the work I do with teachers, with PLCs, with building leaders, and it shapes then the decisions we have to make in terms of the resources we bring in to support teachers. Because what we want to do is bring in resources that provide opportunities as much as we can for these things to come to life within our classroom, regardless of the classroom that we walk into. This is also part of the GIPS On Track to Thrive plan, specifically 2.2, where we talk about equitable access to rigorous and relevant coursework. We in GIPS have really committed to the adoption and implementation of high-quality instructional materials aligned to those grade level standards. So when we think about resources, we have to kind of think about two parts of that. What do they do for teachers and what do they do for students? And in February, when I was here, we brought in a conversation about guaranteed and viable curriculum and how curriculum is separate from resources. And so when we think about that guaranteed and viable curriculum aspect, we're looking at what are those essential standards so that regardless of the 5th grade classroom or the geometry classroom I go into, those learning outcomes are consistent across those classrooms. And then importantly for the work that we're doing here tonight is that we have the time and the resources to support all students and learning in there. And as we talked about a little bit in February, this is really what curriculum equity looks like and plays out within our classrooms. When it comes to curriculum work, this other arm of this conversation, all of these components that I discussed in February are driven foundationally by the standards, whether it's Nebraska standards, Common Core standards up at the high school, and the framework around our commitments or the mathematical practices from the state level. Resources then come in to support implementation of that guaranteed and viable curriculum. So we start with this framework with the standards that everything is built upon. And then they support then the experiences we want kids to have in mathematics. So in February, I showed you the new shift with the mathematical practices, and I mentioned how the state of Nebraska, when they were revising the standards, they asked for our commitments. And so this really then clarifies, we want to make sure we're putting in resources that support the experiences that are consistent with what mathematicians and math students need to have access to on a daily basis within their classroom. So the journey we've been on, this actually started at a secondary level in 2020, 2021. Yes, coming off of the pandemic shutdown, our middle school teachers were actually in the first year of a new resource adoption. And this was really driven as a grassroots movement by them, where they were starting to dig into those experiences and beliefs and commitments really before a lot of other teachers within the district. And they were having to plan tons of stuff and pulling things out of any which way in order to provide those experiences. And so they were really like, we really need to bring in something that's going to help support us in the shifts we're trying to make with kids. And so they did that coming off of a pandemic shutdown, which was incredible because the support and the training and the things that they really needed and should have had access to, they didn't because of the nature of the world we were living in at that time. And in 2018, 2019, so the last NSCAS assessment that we took prior to the pandemic occurring, you can see there's a pretty significant gap between the percent proficient for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade at the state level, which is the blue bar here, and percent proficient within GIPS, which is the red bar here. So there's a pretty significant gap in 2018, 2019. And if you've read anything about mathematics over the course of the pandemic, you probably hear like alarms being raised about achievement just dropping substantially. I mean, there's no denying that mathematics has been hit really hard as a result of learning loss and the shutdown and what that did to the coherence of the development of content. And what we were able to do because of the resource work and because of what teachers were willing to jump in and do is we didn't lose ground. And so what you're looking at on the side here is the 2021, 2022, so last spring's NSCAS results. And you can see the blue bar is the state again. The red bar is Grand Island Public Schools. And yes, that scale is the same as the prior data. What we saw is that we did not experience the learning loss that occurred in the state and across the country. So at 6th grade, for example, the gap was somewhere around 15% prior to the pandemic. Our teachers have been able to bring that down to 3%. And so that resource work and the curriculum work that we do alongside that is really important to shape that guaranteed viable curriculum and provide opportunities for all of our kids to experience mathematics in the way that we want it to. That similar grassroots movement started occurring at the high school then in 2020, that same year, where the Algebra PLC they were having those similar conversations within their building. And I was not even the math curriculum coordinator at that time. I was at Walnut Middle School. And those Algebra PLC teachers were saying to us, we need something different. Our kids deserve better than this. And we need to be able to provide those opportunities for them. So then last year, that algebra team piloted 2 resources, illustrative and college preparatory mathematics. We also at the high school dug into a book called Catalyzing Change in high school mathematics. It's a 3-part series, but it's fabulous at really clarifying what those shifts are and why we need to make them for kids. So then this last year, this was the first year then of our algebra curriculum adoption. They chose to adopt illustrative mathematics. So a year ago I was here asking for funding to purchase the materials that they had requested for the algebra team. And then this last year we were also piloting 2 resources in geometry, illustrative mathematics and open up mathematics, which it's an interesting story because both open up and illustrative were actually initial partners in the development of illustrative. Open Up is brand spanking new, and so it has some kind of updates to the philosophy behind illustrative, which was really awesome for us to be able to get our hands on that. So the geometry team came together in March, and they dug into the data that they had collected. They analyzed the development of special right triangles, which is a specific skill within geometry that's essential, and they looked at how that was developed in one resource over the other. They scored both of them using a rubric, which I did link here, that really allows them to dig into what are those shifts, how does one resource support those shifts, how does this other resource support those shifts. All teachers were involved in piloting both of them, so they really had a good lens of understanding how one occurred in their classroom and then the transition to the other one. They kind of reflected on the student and teacher experiences, which one helped them the most in supporting those experiences that I talked about. And then they ultimately chose between the 2 of them. And they chose that going forward, they would like to adopt Open Up Mathematics, which you can see from the Ed Reports screen here. It's like off the charts green. It's a fabulous resource for them to use. And I think to clarify why this resource work is so important, I actually have a screenshot of a task. If you remember anything about high school geometry, you probably remember SOHCAHTOA. I see some head nodding, right? So I tried to pick a content that's pretty well known, right? So in our prior resource that was adopted in 2016, 2017, so the high school mathematics team hasn't had access to new resources in a while. So the resource they were using was first brought on in 2016, 2017. And what I pulled here is a screenshot of the very first thing that students and teachers see about sine, cosine, and tangent. So you can see here, hey, we have some definitions. The next thing they're going to see is, oh, here is an example problem where you're just writing down these ratios of this definition that we just gave you that doesn't have any connection to anything that we've just talked about. It's just this random definition that's thrown at the beginning of the lesson. When you contrast that to what we're doing now, it's built very intentionally on what students understand about ratios and similar triangles. And so if you actually understand the conceptual understanding of trig, it's fascinating. Because what you're looking at and what this is asking them to do is they're going to be looking at ratios and exploring what happens to ratios of similar triangles. So as that triangle gets bigger, what happens to the ratios? And what they find is that the ratios actually stay the same when you enlarge those triangles. Well, that's really fascinating, because if I have an angle in a right triangle that's 30 degrees, it doesn't matter how big or small the triangle is, the ratio of the opposite side over the hypotenuse will always be the same. So then in the end, after this exploration, we still get to the same learning outcome. You can see here, hey, we have definitions now. This is so cool and so important for people that now we're going to define it. And we're going to say this is sine, this thing we call cosine, this thing we call tangent. So we get to the same definition in the end, but the process in which we go about getting there is totally different than what they were experiencing in this prior version, where I just give them an arbitrary definition that doesn't connect to anything, and now let's do some example problems around it. So the funding for this, the cost to support this for the next 3 years is approximately $45,000. And this was, we're actually going to print these consumables in-house. So we can purchase them from Open Up, but the teachers actually preferred, there's like lesson and then like practice problems, and they preferred to have them separate. Open Up prints them all together. And so they said, we actually like them that way. And we're like, well, okay, we'll see what we can do to make that happen for you. And bonus for us, it actually saves us a lot of money. So yay for teachers actually wanting it that way, and for us. We'll also purchase some teacher guides, and we're also going to bring in Open Up with the project that developed this curriculum is through the Mathematics Vision Project, and we're going to bring them on site for 2 days of professional development. Well, we'll pay teachers to do that as well. The nice thing about this is we have a little bit of ESSER funding that's remaining, so this is not coming out of any L4L budget. We're going to use some remaining ESSER funds in order to bring this project to fruition. But we're only doing this, the printables, for the next 3 years, and that, again, that's kind of looking at what was available within ESSER funding for us to do. So in 3 years, we've already allocated a line item within the L4L budget, like we're gonna have to bring back in some additional funds to continue for, typically an adoption cycle is 6 to 7 years, but you always kind of reflect what's working, what's not working, that kind of a thing. So the continued timeline of our work, this summer we'll bring in the algebra team for just a day. They're just going to make some minor revisions based on the experiences they had this year to their curriculum. The big thing is that the geometry team is going to come in to actually develop their curriculum, that like full-scale green up based on the standards. We want to make sure that whatever we do is going back to the standards. And so they're really going to dig into the standards, and they're going to clarify what are those essential learning outcomes and start building that work and looking at the resource then side by side with that to understand what's happening within the resource to support student understanding of those standards. And then into next year will be the first year of implementation of the new geometry curriculum and their resource. We're also going to be, it's now Algebra 2's turn, so I did attach the needs analysis up on the agenda for today. And the Algebra 2 pilot, we're just following a similar process that we used with the last two. The Algebra 2 pilot is going to start with Open Up, so they're going to be able to be on board with the training that we're going to do with the geometry teachers, so that's kind of a nice 2-for-1. And they actually wanted to try getting the workbooks or the consumables that do the exploration from the company themselves. So that's kind of a nice compare and contrast for us to figure out what's going to be the best decision moving forward, especially because geometry we're going to have to reevaluate in 3 years anyways. And then next summer, we enter the second part of our curriculum work where we really want to know the measure of impact. So on the last part of the curriculum development work, we look at creating benchmark assessments. We have that system set up right now in grades K through 8. And the biggest piece of feedback I've gotten from grades K through 8 teachers is that the benchmark system we've developed is substantial in helping them understand what are their students understanding, what are we still working on, and providing clarity on what is proficiency for this standard actually look like. So teachers use those benchmarks not just in a reactive way to know what standards we need to keep working on, but in a backwards planning way where at the beginning of the chapters or the beginning of the units, they can look at that and go, oh, that's what that means for the standard and what I have to work on. We need to start bringing that into the high school to really clarify what is this standard really demanding, really, that our students understand. Do all of us have the same understanding of what proficiency looks like? And then how are our kids doing? And that will allow us to measure then the impact of the curriculum and the resource work that we're doing, because we don't have an annual NSCAS test like the data that I showed you earlier to be able to use with our freshmen and our sophomores. And then Algebra 2 will begin the curriculum development process, figuring out what their essential standards are and the work. So we got a lot of work to do, but we've had a really fun journey so far, and I have incredible teachers that give their time and energy, because piloting resources is not easy work, and it really involves everyone, because we want to make sure their voice is at the table. But the curriculum development work is also really, really challenging, and not everybody loves digging into standards and things like that. And I'm like, why not? It's so much fun. So we've got incredible teachers, and we're really on the right direction, and we're pretty proud of the work that we've accomplished so far and excited for what's coming next. Questions?
Mrs. Albers?
Can you explain the piloting portion? Like, do you take volunteers? Do you ask for teachers that'll do it? And then just kind of go through what that looks like in a classroom?
Yes. So unfortunately, we're only working with one high school. So your sample, like your size, right, for your pilot's pretty small. So in this case with geometry, our freshman academy teachers actually teach algebra and geometry, but we did not ask them to be a part of the pilot because they had just got done piloting algebra and they were now adopting algebra. So we're like, you guys need a break. Like, we're not bringing you into that. So the geometry PLC, like the core that teaches 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade, only consists of 5 teachers. So to get a good enough experience to really understand what's going to work and what's not going to work, we asked all 5 of those teachers to be a part of it. And because of the work the algebra team had done, and I really had the algebra team talk about, like, what was the experience like? What did the summer work look like when you were developing the curriculum? So that they really understood what they were getting into. But we really needed all 5 of them to be a part of that experience, because otherwise you're putting a lot in the hands of only 2 people. And we want to make sure their voices are heard. The Algebra 2 pilot, there's not as many teachers, there's even fewer teachers. We're only talking right now 3 based on the students, on the schedule that's been crafted by Gish. So it's a pretty tight community. When we did the middle school pilot, clear back, if you remember back in 2020, right before the pandemic, every middle school was involved and they all piloted separate resources. So when we do this work at the elementary level, we're able to, because of this sheer magnitude, generally isolate or utilize task force members to be a part of that pilot work. But when you're looking at such a small population, you're really relying on trying to convince the team to take this work on for the benefit of all of our kids.
Mr. Hawley?
Not so much a question, just more of a comment. I'm sitting here smiling because I find this to be so invigorating. I know it probably sounds weird, but from somebody who's spent a career in the technical trades, it's one thing to understand how to do the formulas and get to the end result, but then to take it and flip it around and work it from a reverse approach, it's going to teach the critical thinking skills that we need in the drafting and construction and welding trades. So just kudos to you. It's really an impressive way to look at it, and I'm excited to see how this rolls out, especially into the kids that want to go into the trades. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I know who to tap into if we, need you to come in and
I know
speak as the kids.
SoCoToa.
Okay, thank you.
I know it well.
That's fantastic.
Dr. Berman, I have a question for you. From the beginning of the implementation of a new program like this, by getting all the teachers up to speed and running it through enough repetitions that it's running smoothly, in your professional opinion, roughly how long do you believe it takes to see results that are quantifiable?
Are you talking after the adoption or during the pilot?
After the adoption.
Probably, honestly, 3 years. Because that first year, your teachers are just figuring their life out, right? Like, let's be really honest. It's hard work to bring in new resources. There's a lot of professional learning that comes alongside, and especially when you're talking about the resources we're bringing in, they're requiring us, all of us as stakeholders, to think differently about the teaching and learning of mathematics, which generally forces us to think about and talk about our beliefs. And what what were your experiences as a teacher, and what do you believe about the teaching and learning of mathematics? So that first year, it's a lot of just survival and getting through that. The second year, you come back and you make some revisions based on the experiences that you had. You relook at your curriculum and the data that you have. Teachers are generally getting more comfortable. 3 years is generally the spot where they start feeling better about things. Like, okay, I can use my standards and I understand the resource and the work that it's having me go through and make some intentional decisions side by side with those things. So professional opinion is 3 years.
As a follow-up to that, can you tell me roughly when the last time something like this was done in geometry where we changed curriculum?
2016, 2017.
2017, okay.
So same thing with Algebra 2. The high school brought in resources. The current resource you saw a screenshot of, that was adopted in 2016, 2017. So Algebra 2, to go back to your question about the pilot, they're gonna lose access to all of the stuff that they currently have online digitally through Pearson, because the contract that was purchased in 2016, 2017 was for 7 years, and this is the end of that 7 years. So they would need something regardless of what we were doing.
Ms. Albers?
And 7 years is the magic number, right, for curriculum that?
Generally, yes. Now, I will tell you, in the middle school work, that was work brought on earlier than the 7 years, because our student data, the experiences, the feedback we were getting from teachers was like, we need to make some big shifts. And that was right when a lot of the work around principles to actions and some of the big research in the mathematics community was really coming out about why we need to think differently about the experiences we're having in the classroom. And so I wouldn't say it's necessarily a sweet spot, but we try to keep it around 7 years if we can, which is why this initial decision is so important, and that we really do our due diligence around piloting and understanding what is actually happening in the classroom and what's happening with the planning within the PLCs as they're using that resource.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Berman. Appreciate your time. Thank you. Okay, item number 8.6, American Civics Bi-Yearly Update. Dr. Evan Lee.
Good evening, everyone. How we doing so far?
Great.
Good. All right. So, last time I was here, I had said something about perhaps bringing my guitar, but because this is really dry material. But I didn't. I kind of shied away from that, and maybe I'll do it next time. We'll see how this goes. Anyway, this is part of a biannual process regarding social studies, and it's a requirement of Public Law 79-724 that asks that we present social studies at least 2 times a year in a public forum, and it also aligns with Board Policy 2230 that we present it to you as well. So the law itself, 79-724, is all about philosophy of social studies, how the belief when this law was enacted that social studies should not be just merely a sit and get session of facts. It should also look at and recognize services of men and women who played a crucial role in achieving independence. These are bullet points straight from the law. Examine the establishment of constitutional government and preservation of our union, incorporate multicultural education, and instill pride and respect for the nation's institutions. In parentheses there, I have the high school classes that align with those 4 bullet points. They do also, within our structure K-12, we also discuss those as those opportunities arise. Currently, our social studies curriculum is aligned to the 2019 standards that were adopted by the state, and our resource, we're currently in our first year of implementation of the resource. When we ran through our pilot program last year, the resource that we chose for grades 5 through 12 was TCI. The resource that we chose for 4th grade was Nebraska Adventure, which was an ongoing, to be truthful, it's about the only Nebraska resource out there right now that has everything that we need to have. And then grades K through 3 are all incorporated within the CKLA package. So some of the requirements that this law asks for, there's a list of ways that we can meet compliance with this. One of the requirements, for example, is have everybody it states that by the time they hit 8th grade, we should meet one of these markers, and then the next marker is sometime between grades 9 and 12. And what we have done, our current practice is in 8th grade, we do a project based around Abraham Lincoln. In 9th grade, we do a project based around Martin Luther King. The reason why we chose 8th and 9th grade there is because both of those classes currently are the American history classes. Other components of that particular law are to attend a public meeting such as this, to another one that they could that is on the law is take the American Civics test, and they just added a 4th one this year, and that is to be a volunteer at a voting center. So be a poll worker basically. But we've chosen to do the projects, and we've been doing that for, well, since before I got here. All right, so below 6th grade, the requirement is we devote at least 1 hour per week for the following purposes, and you can read through those. We meet those standards through a variety of ways, and not necessarily just in the history portion of their classes. For example, music class meets that historical background memorization, singing patriotic songs. That's something that's pretty key within their curriculum. But throughout their elementary, they meet these bullet points as well. Another requirement is we have 2 courses in high school that are devoted to civics and American history, and meeting these particular bullet points, and we do that through our government class as well as American history. The Constitution of Nebraska is covered within that 4th grade. The history of Nebraska is the 4th grade topic. So, but most of this is all of this is also covered in the government class. This is a screenshot of our current brand new sparkling website, and we have a section on there for social studies, as is also another requirement, and it's the link at the bottom of that page links to the Nebraska standards on there, and that's housed in our Leading for Learning page on our website. As far as alignment to our strategic plan, it meets these 3 areas: empowering students through literacy. Every student has equitable access to rigorous, relevant coursework. And every student is on track to meet the promise of the GIPS graduate profile. And that's my presentation. Questions?
Ms. Albers?
So I think last year, did you and Dr. Tom Jack present? Am I thinking of that? And so last year I asked if there was any critical race theory that was taught in this curriculum, so I'll just ask that again.
Sure.
Just for fun.
Yeah, critical race theory is, you're talking about the 1619 project? Or, yeah, it's not in there. Yeah. That's all you need to say. Okay. Okay. Just clarifying. Just clarifying. Yes, absolutely.
Anyone else? All right, well, thank you very much, Dr. Lee.
So much.
I would love to have seen how you could have done that with a guitar.
Well, I had a plan, but maybe next time.
Thank you very
Right.
much. Okay, item number 8.7, Harvard Strategic Data Project Fellowship Update and Capstone Project. We have Mr. Pat Larson and Dr. Jonathan Dahl.
All right, thank you for having me tonight. Do you want to speak? In May of 2021, this board approved the use of ESSER funds to send me as the data steward to participate in a fellowship through the Center of Education Policy Research at Harvard University. It's a 2-year fellowship, and I'm coming to the end of it. I'll be presenting in May, and then the graduation is in September. And so I wanted to come to this board and just offer an update on what we did and what it means to this district and some benefits we got. Their mission is to bring together education data leaders to advance the critical projects and transform the use of data in education. They train fellows how to use data and how to use data efficiently and be a component of change within the district to help change the organization. They had a lot of emphasis on equity and the barriers that some subgroups might endure during the education process. And they really honed in on the information that allows us to go deeper in the data and to invoke more questions and find the root causes of a lot of these achievement gaps. So the root cause part of that is something that they really did emphasize. We covered a lot of stuff like advanced research methods. We talked about leadership policy. We had courses in communication, but we also had a lot of courses and we studied data governance and data literacy. And these are the two courses that I think really resonated with me the most. I spent a lot of time evaluating our data and our process here in this district and the communication, and I kind of looking through those through a governance and literacy lens. And I think this district has a lot to gain by applying some of these principles. And so that's something that our department will be working on and bringing these things and how to use our data more effectively and more efficiently and and make decisions based on evidence, not so much emotion. So our plan, our strategic plan for the district emphasizes to alleviate inequities within our district. And this fellowship really focused on improving student outcomes with an emphasis on equity and using evidence and data to solve the problems. So we now belong to a vast network of professionals that are committed to solving problems that we face every day. There are over 500 fellows now through this project. The fellowship started in 2008. It's a 2-year thing. I am in cohort 13. Dr. Dahl here was actually in cohort 5. And so as this program progresses, we get more and more people in our network of communication. It's a lot of diversity within the fellowship. I studied with people from all over the country, some other countries, some doing K-12 districts just like ours, some bigger, some smaller, a lot of nonprofit agencies, a lot of state agencies, and they really are good at fostering a community of professionals that are trying to solve the same kind of problems we are trying to solve, and maybe even have solved problems that we're trying to solve. And so, you know, one thing that I've learned through this process is that the things we're dealing with and the problems we're trying to solve are very universal throughout the country. So that was kind of comforting. But everybody was you know, committed to practices for using data and to maximizing the impact of the data we collect. So the culmination of this 2-year fellowship is a capstone project. So we decided to do a capstone project based on identifying risk factors for K-8 students that affect the graduation profile, and then using that to promote the equitable distribution of resources throughout the organization. We decided to focus on improving the graduation rate. So we've been consistently underperforming the state in graduation rate. There was a blip there in 2001, and I can only assume that has something to do with the COVID or the pandemic on how we handled it, maybe our do no harm policy. I don't know, but last year it bounced right back to follow the trend. But the state's also been declining through these years. And so it's not just a problem for us, it's a problem for the state as well. So we set out to find the barriers that our students that are impacting our students for this graduation. And so really we're trying to find the root cause of this. So we decided to dive into the data and find factors, the data that we had access to find factors that affected the graduation, the on-time graduation rate, the 4-year graduation rate. So we really came up with 6 key factors that we felt had a big impact on whether or not those students were graduating. And before we get to the 6, there's a couple metrics that we did not use, and I think it's important to note the ones that we opted not to use. Free and reduced meal status is a very common proxy for poverty, and there's a lot of research that says that it's really a poor proxy for poverty. And so I've been a strong opponent for using that in socioeconomic status situations. Our district here is about 60–70% free and reduced. We have about 5 elementary schools that are community eligible, which means if you attend that school, you qualify for free and reduced regardless of any other income status. So we have families that don't apply because they don't need to. We have families that wouldn't qualify that do because of the very nature of the school they attend. So we decided not to use that one. And another one that I think we realized wasn't as effective as you think it would be was using race. We decided not to use race because in our district, again, we're 55–60% Hispanic, and a lot of research has shown that 2nd and 3rd year generation Hispanic families in this country do not have the same experiences as newcomers to this country. And so with a large demographic like that, to lump them all together, it seemed like it was counterintuitive to the data we were trying to actually pin down and find. And also things like behavior and attendance. We didn't use that because we wanted to look more for the root cause of these things rather than just look at these 2 metrics on the surface. A student can be chronically absent in one grade and not the next, or for one teacher and not the next. And so there's a lot of, and behavior is the same way. So we found that with the fluctuation of behavior that a student experiences, that it didn't make much sense to use that as a factor here. Instead, we were looking for root causes. So the metrics we did land on were a couple easy, obvious ones like homelessness, English language learners, and students with IEPs, or our special ed students. The less obvious ones that we found were things like students with chronic illness. We realized through a national survey that we partook in that those kids are sometimes are stigmatized for their affliction, and it affects. There's a correlation with attendance rates for kids that are chronically ill. Another one is students born in countries that are, so the student population of our schools represents something like 30 different countries. A handful of those countries underperform all the kids from all the other countries. So we looked at all the achievement and graduation rates of kids that were born in other countries, and determined that there were about, we took the bottom quartile, the bottom 25%, which is 5 countries that we felt needed, could use extra resources. Their performance on achievement and their graduation rates were extremely low. And so we used that as a factor. And the other one we used was the geography of our city. So our attendance centers are broken down into about 49, 50 different attendance centers. So Stolly Park, for example, is one school, but it really has 3 neighborhood attendance centers that go to Stolly Park. It's a map that's existed forever. I don't know how it originated, but it predates me. It's something that we've always had. So we used that, and what we did was we calculated the average single household dwelling in those areas, and then we ranked them, and then we took the bottom 25% and we used this as a proxy for our poverty, or a proxy for our socioeconomic status. And what we found is when we did that and we looked at those low valuation areas, we found that there was a really strong correlation to how those students performed on math assessments and how those students performed on reading assessments, and even had some correlation with their attendance rates. And so we really think that we found a good metric in there. And the truth of it, when I look at these, when we map this out and look at how they're structured, we find things like Shoemaker, for example, has probably one of the highest valuation areas, but it also has the lowest. And so when we look at a school, we can't just tell because we know it's in an affluent part of town that the students there aren't in more need, because there are really lower valued places in that area. So that one we found to be a really strong metric as well. So then what we did was we took these 6 factors and we calculated it for the last 5 graduating cohorts. So we combined the last 5 cohorts, graduating cohorts, into one population. So we had a population number like 2,800. And what we found was that students that didn't meet any of those factors, they weren't homeless, they didn't have an IEP, they weren't ELL, they were born in our country or in one of the other countries. If they had none of those factors, their graduation rate was about 94, 95%. And they had about a 0.4% dropout rate. And then when we look at the antithesis, if they had met 4 of those factors, they were either homeless or they met 4, not all 6, just 4 of them, their graduation rate dropped down to almost 50% with a high dropout rate. And so no student in the last 5 cohorts fit 5 or more of those factors. That's why we stopped at 4, because no student had a 5 or 6 of those. So when we look at this graph and we see the linear relationship to it, it really provides strong evidence that this index really does predict on-time graduation, or it has a really good potential to. So some of the things that we learned sorting through this data and looking at this data that struck me as potential bright spots in our district. When I look again at the last 5 cohorts combined, when I look at students that came to this country as newcomers and lump them together as a subgroup, they're graduating our district at 80%. That's a big nod to our newcomer program, because that number is far higher than I would have expected, and I think it's probably higher than the newcomer program would have expected. But the fact that we're dealing with newcomers and graduating them at that rate, I think is awesome. And the other one that I wanted to point out was that when I looked at these last 5 cohorts, and I look at the ones that attended 5th grade here, so we've had access to them through at least part of elementary, middle school, and high school. When we have access to the students and we're teaching them within this district, those kids have a graduating rate of 92%. So when we have access to a kid and we can provide services to this kid, this district is doing a really good job of graduating their students. And I think that's a big tip of the hat to the teachers and the staff in this district. So the next steps for this is obviously to test this index, make sure that, test it for strength, and make sure that it's useful. We'll continue some correlation testing, but the idea really is to develop this index and then use it to allocate resources to schools and to classrooms and to teachers. We have a process now where we allocate some of the resources. I haven't been involved in a lot of that, but what I did is I took this data and applied it to just the 3 factors we normally use: free and reduced meal, ELL, and IEP, and the trends were, there was no trend. I mean, the data was all over the place. So using just those 3 like we have been, it proved to be relatively ineffective. And lastly, it's been a great journey for me, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have done this, and I couldn't have done it without this board, even though there's a lot of new faces here. It's still the support, Dr. Dahl, Corey, and the board, and everybody. So I want to thank you for that. Questions? Everybody just wants to go to bed.
Mr. Garcia Mendez.
Thank you. You presented at L4L, and I just want to say how impactful this is. I mean, just so that the rest of the board knows, I mean, this is data-driven, this is evidence-based, this is real life, and a lot of times people just don't realize how much our community is suffering, whether they are living in a low-income neighborhood or kind of dealing with these external factors. And I think the more that we pay attention to this and then kind of combine efforts as a community to really combat this, I mean, our graduations are going to shoot up, and then it's all going to be amazing. But no, yeah, thank you, and congratulations that you're going through this and taking the time to bring that knowledge back here. But yeah, that's awesome.
Ms. Alberts?
So when I was studying for the board meeting last night and I saw this, I was just enamored with it. It was so interesting to me. And so Eric and I were in the car today going to a conference in Lincoln, and I started talking to Eric about it, and we were just visiting about how impactful this was. And I'm just thrilled, and I commend you for your hard work to find those little bits of what we can use to really see the students that are truly suffering and not do it the way that we were doing it before. And I mean, this could be just so changing for the way that we do business. So thank you.
There's some big districts like in LA. They do something similar, and they use some of the same factors. They have a lot more, and they do some weighting with it and all that. But the big thing is a lot of these factors, we can prove through evidence with our own data. But the truth is, there's a lot of research backing them up too, and so that's the other benefit of using something that's not only proven by our data, but somebody else in some other district across the country has also proved it. And I think that has a lot of power to it and a lot of credibility to it. And that was great about this fellowship, is that I was dealing with people way smarter than I was. And you just learn a lot by being around that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, item number 8.8, information technology storage and server purchase. Mr. Gearhart.
Good evening. First things first, I have to disagree with Pat. I don't know that I've ever met anybody that's smarter than him, but anyway, I'll keep it brief. We've got some equipment we need to replace. We have a storage array, or a SAN, that's aging. Our current system right now that runs production is about 5 years old. That's the typical lifespan of something like that. What we do here is we'll then take the one that's 5 years old and we'll recycle it. We'll put it in our disaster recovery site so that we can have it ready to go, staged and maintained, so that if anything should happen to this building, we can bring things online and continue to function. So our current production system's 5 years old on the storage side. The backup system we're using is 10 years old. Sounds familiar, just describe the process. So we'd be replacing that and then we'd be doing that shuffle, and then the old system we'd divest of. The total cost, in addition to that, the storage array is one component of the quote that's on the agenda tonight. The other component is for 3 new servers. We currently have about 6 really, a professional term here, beefy servers. They got lots of RAM, lots of processor, et cetera. They run our district, and right now, about half of those are pushing 8 years old, and so that's the kind of the lifespan on the server side of things. So what we would do, again, same situation. We're going to replace 3 of those servers with the equipment coming in. We're going to repurpose some of the old ones to make sure we have equipment in place if we ever need to spin up a disaster recovery site, and then we'll get rid of some of our oldest. So, and the benefit when we do something like this, when you're talking 8 years in technology growth, get the new equipment, it's faster, it's better. You can typically start to get away with a little bit less. So the goal is actually to reduce our total server count, et cetera, with this purchase. So the total's a little less than at the FNF meeting. We got a chance to do a little negotiating with the vendor, with the reseller. I think we were at 118, we're down to 102.8. And then for the storage network, it's going to run us $56,213.46. And that's actually about $29,000 less than the last one we purchased. So as Mr. McFarland said in our meeting, it's the only thing that's gone down in price over the last several years. But we're happy for it. It benefits us. The servers are going to be 3 of those systems for a total of $46,630. And they're still priced pretty on par for what a new current technology server system would run. So this is information for tonight, and then we'll come back next month for an action on it.
Mr. Linsky.
Quick question for you, Mr. Garrett. Does that price include install? Is that something that you and your team can do, or do we have to have people come in here and do that for us?
So they include that. They'll bring it in, they'll get it racked, they'll get it set up, get it stood up, and then provide on-site training to get it up and running. It's a very rudimentary level. Then we take over from there. But yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I'll go ahead and say this, Mr. Garrett. I appreciate you holding your feet to the fire. Getting an 18% discount appreciate your effort. You can't get it unless you ask for it.
Absolutely.
So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. All right. Thank you.
Item 8.9, discuss, consider, and take all action necessary to enter into real estate listing agreement for the old Grand Island Public Schools Early Learning Center property located at 4360 West Capitol Avenue as presented, and to authorize the board president to execute the same.
Howdy, folks. The board has indicated that they wish to divest of the property located at 4360 West Capitol Avenue, which is the site of the old Elementary Learning Center. The property was declared as surplus property at a previous board meeting. Attached to this agenda item is a listing agreement with Realtor Mr. Al Avery. The school district will need to enter into the attached agreement and to designate the board president, Mr. Hank McFarland, to execute the sale of the property on behalf of the school district. The listing agreement has been reviewed and modified by the school district's legal counsel. The listing and the disposal of the property has also been discussed and agreed to over numerous months by the Facilities and Finance Committee. This is an info and action item for this evening. Are there any questions regarding the listing agreement that I can answer for you? Pretty straightforward. If you thought Dr. Lee was boring, I'm more boringer.
Okay, item number 8.10, discuss, consider, and take all action necessary to incumbency certificate and resolution with First National Capital Markets. Dr. Schroeder.
Thank you. Grand Island Public Schools currently invest funds held by the school district as cash reserve and as proceeds for bond fund payments in the Nebraska Liquid Asset Fund. The district has enjoyed a long and stable investment history with NLAF. However, the investment products that are made available to the district through NLAF can be somewhat limited, contingent upon market conditions. Due to the fact that investments are somewhat limited, the district is unable to maximize its capital investment to help offset operating costs and debt repayment. First National Capital Markets offer additional secure investment opportunities for the school district, such as the opportunity to invest in treasury products, which produce a higher rate of return on investments than the CD investments typically offered by the NLAF. The recommendation from the Finance Office is to open an account with First National Capital for the purpose of creating additional investment tools to the district's portfolio in order to make the best use of the taxpayers' investment in the school district. The NLAF will continue to be utilized in combination with the First National Capital Markets investment tools to maximize the school district's rate of return on investments. First National Capital Market investments tools simply represent another resource for the Chief Financial Officer and the Finance and Facilities Committee to use. The utilization of First National Capital Market account has been discussed and considered by the Facilities and Finance Committee for the past several months, and the committee has approved the creation of the account and its use by the district. In order to establish the account with First National, I would request that the Grand Island Board of Education approve the incumbency certificate and resolution that is attached to this agenda item. Doing so will allow me to create an account with First National Bank, and it will designate the appropriate district representatives to transact on the account. Those who will be authorized to transact on the account through approval of the resolution will be Mr. Matt Fisher, Mr. Hank McFarland, Ms. Robin Dexter, and myself, Ken Schroeder. Do you have any questions regarding that I can answer for you? This is also an info and action item tonight.
Okay. Item number 8.11, discuss, consider, and take all action necessary to resolution to open First National Bank simple business account and to designate approved signers on the account.
Okay. In conjunction with the creation of the First National Capital Market account, Grand Island Public Schools would need a business operating account to manage financial transactions with First National Bank. The recommendation is to open a simple business account with the First National Bank branch in Grand Island, Nebraska for this specific and solitary purpose. The board president, superintendent, board secretary, and the chief financial officer should be authorized to transact on the account. And so I would request approval of the creation of that account. This is also an info and action item for this evening. Questions or concerns?
All right. Thank you, Dr. Schroeder. Item 8.12, Student Parent Handbook Revisions for 2023-2024. Dr. Dexter.
Well, this is a process we go through every year, and so we have a team, representatives of each level, grade level, and we just review the handbook. And it's been about 10 years. 10 years ago, we just deleted everything, started from scratch, recreated it. It just gotten so copy and pasted, and we had a bunch of redundancies. So again, we meet just online, and most of us have been on the committee for a while, and so we just keep notes. You know, people will pull out a folder like this and have a napkin with something that they wanted to remember to make sure we changed. So just real quick, most of these are just real kind of clerical cleanup, but just like deleting information with our past HR person and updating that within the handbook. Just adding some things to policy. It's now married, pregnant, or parenting students, so change that. School hours, had a wrong policy number. We added fees for lost or damaged instruments. We'd had one for other materials, but not specifically music instruments. And since we spent quite a bit of money this year on brand new ones, we want to take care of them. Meal and milk prices. We will have a hearing where Chris Spellman will come in and set the new prices, so those will just be added to the handbook when those are updated. Graduation requirements, we had to make some changes there that you saw in policy about not going forward with computer science at this time until NDE gets that figured out. Again, update the policy on married, pregnant, or parenting students. This one was caught, Justin Knight caught this one, and he just reminded all of us that you need to have specific guidance for how do you get into National Honor Society. And it was kind of cool to meet with the National Honor Society sponsor and see what she had put together, and she was spot on, so we'll add that to the handbook. And just updated supply list. We have to, anything we charge students for, we have to list in the student handbook, and we had not listed PE uniforms in the past. We also had not listed that we asked students to pay $25 to help with the royalties for the musical. And then we just had some deletions, cleaning up our student laptop handbook. That will all be deleted. And then, oh, and these were also updates to the laptop. And then again, just a name change for Mr. Stelk. Any questions about the process and recommendations?
Mr. Linsky.
Just a quick question. Why are we charging the children, or the students, excuse me, $25 for royalties for theater?
It's for the musical, and it's just so expensive. And so that's added to the cost to be in the musical.
Why is that not budgeted for?
Just expensive. And it's been there, we just haven't had it in the handbook.
Thank you.
Mr. Cloutier?
Sort of on that note, I will make one comment. I kind of had a question. I know for a lot of athletic activities, the participating students are able to do fundraisers to gather money from the community to sort of support those expenses that can't normally be covered with the budget. So I was just wondering how viable of an option is that, because I'm sure with the amount of support we have for the fine arts in our community and parents that are really active in the activities of students, that just 25 per student probably could be covered with a fundraiser like that. So I wanted to know how viable that was.
Excellent. And they do all kinds of fundraising. So, but it's spread across. And so anytime they can pick up that funding, a student can work the concession stand, raise funds in another way. It all goes into that pot. And so then when they've checked off, hey, I donated or I raised $150, and that $25 gets taken off of their account. But the boosters do. I don't know how they keep track of it all, and all of the work involved to pull that off with the expense that it has.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Dexter. Item 8.13, construction update. Mr. Petch.
Thanks. First off is the high school addition, coming along on schedule pretty well. We have a roof on now, windows are in, and they're working on the above ceiling HVAC, electrical, plumbing. Still moving forward on, like I said, schedules. So no big concerns until summer gets here. When that happens, then we have to move in and try and get about 4 months work done in 2 months. The cafeteria and areas we can't get into right now. So we're prepping for it and planning for it, so expect to make it happen. The other two big projects, the Knickerham HVAC upgrade, we've had a pre-con for that, but work doesn't start until May now. We also had a pre-construction meeting for the Walnut vestibule, as well as the other vestibule projects that are attached to that. And those don't start until May either. So we're just planning and getting our materials ready. So as long as everything comes in on time, we'll get done on time. If it doesn't, then we'll go to Plan B. So I'll conclude and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Mr. Petch. Item 8.14, Student Representative Report. Mr. Cloutier.
So, good evening to everybody. I want to start off by highlighting some pretty important academic news and achievements of some students. So, recently we held our school-sponsored ACT Day, where juniors take the ACT test and sophomores take the pre-ACT. This is also the first year for juniors where you actually had to go to the John Baylor / ACT prep class. When I was a junior, that was not required, so I'm personally very optimistic about how that will affect our scores. I think that was a much needed change in policy. Also upcoming the first week of May will be all the AP exams for students participating in advanced placement courses. So we're definitely studying very hard for those and looking to make senior high proud. Some other stuff, partially academic, partially also just career related. At the end of March and start of April, we had our annual hiring fair where Islanders were able to network with a variety of local business owners and also stuff like city organizations. GIPS was there. And they offered a ton of internships and jobs for over the summer, and also just permanent things for Islanders looking to become employed straight out of high school. So very positive results, lots of community engagement there. We also recently held the Academic Aristocratic Honors Night through the GIPS Foundation in celebration of the almost $400,000 in scholarships that were given away this year, and that's an annual thing. So every year that much money gets given away to some of the highest achieving students in any sort of discipline, be that academic, athletic, some sort of performing arts, visual arts. Anything you can think of gets rewarded and recognized on that night, both just through the honors of participating there and also through scholarships and monetary support. Moving on, I'd also like to point out that on April 29th, our casino night themed senior prom will be held at Riverside. After that, the post prom, which is generously funded and planned by Islander parents, will take place at senior high. And then, as much as it grieves me personally, but also I'm very excited, coming up shortly, both a new student representative will take my spot, and then for all the class officers, there will be elections held to elect the new class officers, so president, vice president, secretary, and then my position, obviously, as student representative. This will be the first year the school board representative will be an elected position, so we'll sort of get to hear the students' voice and input on who gets to sit here. We also had more candidates interested in this position than last year, both proportionally to the other positions and just in terms of overall count. I believe it went up by one, which is kind of cool, I guess. You know, it's one of those positions that often gets overlooked. You know, I've also often been told that, you know, somebody had no idea that I even did this, or they never bothered to pay attention to anything. But a lot of students, especially just through the Superintendent Student Advisory Council, I think sort of gained a greater of an understanding of that. And I think the position will continue to expand through the years, so I'm excited for that. Speaking of the Student Superintendent Advisory Council, we recently had an extremely productive meeting of the council where we made immense progress, as Mr. Fisher knows, towards addressing period poverty and making period products available more at the high school, also as Ms. Halbers knows. And over the years, we'll be also looking to expand that to all the middle schools as well. It is sort of an unfortunate issue that we're still facing today. Obviously, with, you know, various socioeconomic concerns, you also run into that, and it can also be a particularly rough cultural thing, you know, for young students, young girls. So I think that's a really cool, project that we've been working on sort of all year, is just making sure that no matter who you are, what background you come from, what kind of income your family makes, that's available to you, with free of any sort of stigma or shame that, perpetuates our society to this day. So just really excellent stuff that we've been working on. Very proud of everybody in that group. On that note, I'd also like to talk about some more accomplishments I'm proud of as far as activities and athletics go. So there'll be a lot of track stuff here, but that's because we've been doing really good at track. I don't know if any of you have been keeping track of that or have family members, but recently at the Grand Island Invitational, GI invite that we hosted, the girls track team scored over 100 points there for the first time in 7 years and were runners-up at the meet with lots of fantastic individual performances. So also our 4x1 and 4x4 relay teams both fought really hard and got second place, both of them. Kira Jones earned silver in long jump and high jump. Cassidy Hinken was second in the triple jump. Celia McCoy was second in the 300 meters. And then Jade Raw Ward and Riley Deegan brought home gold in 100-meter hurdles and pole vault, respectively. Deegan also went on to break the Columbus meet record and the Gish school record for pole vault. The boys team also did well, finishing in third place at the invite. And then we won 2 gold medals. Trey Enberg won the 400-meter gold medal, and Ruben Caceres won the 3,200 meter. Caden Roberson took home silver in disc and also medaled in shot as well. So, and then several other competitors are already lined up to qualify for the state track meet with very impressive performances. Obviously, our boys golf and both our girls and boys soccer seasons are going on at this time, and they're going very well. We have increased participation in almost every sport you can think of. For show choir, the popular cabaret night that's held annually was held April 13th. It was very successful. Also, I'd like to sort of highlight our poetry club. We participated in a competition, the All Rights Reserved competition in Omaha, and won 3rd place there. So, and that is all I have for you tonight. Thank you. If there's any questions, sorry. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mr. Cloutier. Item 8.15, Superintendent Report.
Well, Zach did a good job of covering several of the things that I was gonna mention in my report too. Superintendent Advisory Group has really done some nice work around the things that Zach highlighted, and I think they're really to be commended. The election process was something we put before them. They had a really in-depth discussion about, making sure that, this was an important position, and how we went about selecting that person needed to be reflective of that and make sure that we got the right person in the position. So they, ultimately decided to go through a vetting process, where that person would apply, the applications would be reviewed, and make sure that the person met the criteria for being in that role, and then they would go through an election process with the rest of the offices. So I thought saw a lot of really good thought process from our students around that. And then the work with the period poverty just really has been outstanding in terms of the way they've stepped up, the mature level that they've dealt with, what is a tough topic. And so I think that's been really good. A couple of the other things that Zach mentioned, the honors night the other night, had the chance to attend that and be a part of that. Really, really impressive, the things that our students are doing from an academic standpoint. And since Lindsay's not here, I'm going to throw a few foundation pieces in with my report. But Zach had mentioned some of the scholarships that were recognized that night. And actually the foundation is awarding just shy of $600,000 in scholarships this year to the class of 2023. I think that is 172 different scholarships. So that's one of the things that they're doing that part of that was the recognition the other night, but there's a lot of other scholarships that the foundation is also involved in. And so I think that's really an important piece of what our foundation does for us. And, along the foundation lines, right now we're in the process of getting staff, foundation commitments for the coming year. And wanted to remind board members that we would also like to have board commitment. And again, the commitment, it's not so much about the money. I think a lot of it, especially for our board and our leadership team, it's really about being able to show that commitment from our highest level people. And I think that really is important when the foundation goes out and has discussion with groups or individuals about making donations that are very important for us to be able to put those scholarships in place, to be able to fund the grant things that the foundation does for our different teachers and buildings and some of those different things. So again, we'll just encourage everyone to, if you haven't had the chance, they're wrapping that up shortly, so encourage everyone to jump on board with that. One other foundation item, the foundation is, getting ready to release their nominations for their 2023 Teacher of the Year Awards. And so those forms are going to be coming out, and I think they have a deadline for return of May 20th. So again, if you have someone that you'd like to nominate for those types of recognition, that's going to be coming up as well. A couple other things. Staffing obviously is something that we've been talking about quite a bit, but there wasn't anything on the board agenda about staffing tonight. That's because Chief Denny has already taken care of all of our staffing issues, so unfortunately not. We are still actively recruiting and seeking applicants. We're still short about 18 elementary teachers. Just regular classroom teachers, and then I think we've got 4 or 5 specials that we're still looking to fill on the elementary side. Probably one of our biggest areas of concern right now is we're short 5 middle school science teachers. I think Mr. Court has coerced maybe a couple of teachers to come back into that area, so maybe we're down to just 3. But still definitely short in that middle school science area. And high school wise, actually we're in fairly good shape there. But some of those other areas we're definitely still looking and trying to figure out where we're at and where we're going to go with some of those things. One of the things I think that's been really helpful for us this year is March 31st, we did close the registration. So that initial registration, if you weren't registered in that initial time period, there's no guarantee that you're going to go to your neighborhood school. We're going to go ahead and set our classes based off the numbers that we have at that point. And then we'll decide, where we have availability. Obviously, anyone that comes to the district is going to be able to attend, but it just may not be in the school that is located the closest to them. So I think that's going to really help in terms of setting our class sizes and holding to that. Along those same lines, one of the other things that has been done at a little bit earlier time frame than typically has is, the course schedules at the high school, at least the initial course schedules were released. And so, again, earlier than usual, people are starting to get a sense for it. And I think part of that is then to allow some adjustments as we move along. And so one of the things you find out when you start releasing things early is you have people that don't like it. And so we started to hear from, people that have concerns. And I guess the good thing about that is then you do have a chance to really evaluate it. And sometimes, when somebody doesn't like something, there's a really good reason for it, and we can go back and make some adjustments. So that's going on right now too. Just wanted to mention next week on the 26th is the apprentice signing day, and Governor Pillen is actually going to be here for that event. I think it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, And so if you are available and you want to attend, I'm sure we can sneak you in somehow. And so, again, just a good opportunity to really highlight some of the really great things that we're doing with the high school academy programs, and being able to place students in some apprenticeship opportunities, chances for them to have some really good on-the-job experiences prior to leaving high school. So, again, would encourage any of you that are available to maybe attend that. Then just a reminder, we have our master's facility planning on Friday. So that will be kind of an important day. Earlier today, Lisa and Eric and I did attend the NASB Legislative Advocacy Day. Like many of those legislative events, mostly it's news you really don't want to hear. But I guess, did walk away today, and I felt good about one thing, is I do think that out of the governor's finance plan, there may actually be some dollars in that will be beneficial to Grand Island Public Schools. Most of what I had heard and the way that it had originally folded out, we were supposed to get some special ed dollars, and then that was changed, and it was revamped, so it looked like we would not get those dollars, but now it's been moved again. So hopefully there are maybe some dollars coming that we will not see in the initial year, but beyond the initial year, which would be next year, there is some fairly significant dollars that we may realize out of that if it passes. Still has to get through a legislation that is yet to advance one bill this legislative session. So otherwise, they're putting together Christmas tree bill for education that has a lot of the different things, some of them good, some of them not so good, that are circulating in the legislation right now. I think the thought is there's not going to be a whole lot of anything that advances, so they're trying to hang as many things on this Christmas tree bill as possible. And so, that's one that we're definitely going to need to be watching, and we'll see where the education, the governor's, funding package goes. Other than that, there's not a whole lot moving. I don't know, Eric, Lisa, anything you want to add to that? There you go, no new bad news. That's probably a good summary.
So, yeah, there were no real dramatic surprises.
Otherwise, any questions anyone has? That's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fisher.
One thing about
Sure,
the
you bet. Go ahead.
I wanted the board to know, and everybody else in the audience, that Mr. Petch did graciously buy, I think, 9 of the tampon and pad machines that you just have to wave your hand in front of, and it'll have free products. We're going to do a pilot program at the high school. The Superintendent Student Advisory Council, I just can't tell you how the mature conversations we had with the males and females in the group. I was super proud of them, and they've had great ideas. And now there's a smaller group of us that are meeting with Mrs. Val Porter. She's a social worker. We're starting to get the nurses involved, so we're hoping that we have some success with the pilot program. Then we want to take it down to the middle schools, and then do something with the elementary schools going forward. So I just wanted you to know we did make those steps in some very pleasing progress.
Okay, action item 9.1, master agreement with the GIEA. Mr. Court.
Thank you. So this is what we presented at the last meeting last month, and just, I guess, any questions?
Mr. Linsky.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the master agreement with the GIEA.
Seconded by Mr. Hawley. Discussion. Seeing none, I think we can proceed to the vote. Once again, the motion is to accept the master agreement with the GIEA. You may vote at this time. Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Court. 9.2, discuss, consider, and take all action necessary to enter into a real estate listing agreement for the old Grand Island Public Schools Early Learning Center, property located 4360 West Capitol Avenue, as presented, and to authorize the board president to execute the same.
Did you think of any questions since I was up here last?
No.
I'd like to make a motion to enter into the real estate listing agreement for the Grand Island Public Schools Early Learning Center, property located at 4360 West Capitol Avenue, as presented, and to authorize the board president to execute the same.
Seconded by Mr. Hawley. Discussion. Seeing none, proceed to a vote. Motion passes. Item 9.3, discuss, consider, and take all action necessary to incumbency certificate and resolution with First National Capital Markets. No questions, but entertain a motion at this time.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the incumbency certificate and resolution of First National Capital Markets designating Matt Fisher, Hank McFarland, Robin Dexter, and Ken Schroeder as authorized designees on the account for the school district.
Second by Mr. Hawley. Discussion. Seeing none, proceed to a vote. Motion passes. Item 9.4, discuss, consider, and take all action necessary to resolution to open First National Bank simple business account and to designated approved signers on the account. Entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the resolution to open First National Bank simple business account and to designate the approved signers on the account as Matt Fisher, Hank McFarland, Robin Dexter, and Ken Schroeder.
Second by Mr. Garcia Mendez. Discussion? Seeing none, we may proceed to a vote on the same. Motion passes. Thank you,
Thank you.
Dr. Schroeder. Item 9.5, Panorama Survey Renewal. Dr. Dexter.
And this was presented as information last month. Any questions?
I would like to make a statement here, what I'm going to say has nothing to do with any of our employees here, IT, Dr. Dexter, anybody at all. This is more in regards, my comments are completely germane to Panorama and what it entails. I completely understand it's a statutory requirement for Nebraska schools to have surveys to monitor so-called school climate and culture. And in my pursuit of a college education, I had enough marketing statistics for my lifetime. And during that time, I've learned that most surveys are of relatively little statistical value. And that's based on two things. Number one is sample size. Anything less than several 100,000 usually is difficult to extrapolate any useful information. And the second is the use of numerical grading scales. Those are incredibly inaccurate, particularly when they are coupled with a small sample size. And due to these and other factors, I'm just not convinced that the information that we're getting from the Panorama survey is having any statistically significant effect on how we run our schools. And I would like to, as a result of that, I'd like to challenge our administration to help change my mind. Prove to me that the roughly $50,000 a year that we spend on Panorama is actually significantly improving our education system here. And as a taxpayer, I just do not feel it is such. So if we can't change my mind, and I encourage that to happen, I believe it's time to spend the minimum amount possible we can on a survey system that would simply check the box of a government requirement. That's all I have to say. I would entertain any other comments, questions. Mr. Hawley.
President McFarland, what would you recommend in lieu of Panorama? What would be the solution to simply check the box?
Well, at this point in time, we're kind of up against over a barrel because we don't have time to find something. They have looked at different systems in the past, and they've been incredibly expensive. But my point is that I do not feel that an expensive survey system is going to change our academics one bit. That's just my personal opinion. And I think we need to find a more economical method, be it in-house or other.
Do we have any administration that would want to speak to how this has affected our education, to provide some insight from Mr. McFarland?
Just our school improvement plan and our culture and climate goal. Every school has a culture climate goal. And so that's the data that supports that. One other thing to think about is we have one more year, and our accreditation visit for the 5th year is in next January. And maybe go ahead and approve it for next year with the caveat that we would go back to the table and explore other surveys. Because we will take a ding if this is the only data we have consistent over the last 5 years. Everything else has changed. MAP, NDE, and bottom line, when they just say, why did you drop it? We just say our board did not want to support Panorama survey moving forward. But if we could keep it one more year to have that closing data for that 5th year of our accreditation cycle, that we would take this next year to dig into what's working, not working about Panorama. What is it, to check the box, or is it a survey that would really give us some data about how kids are doing, what they're seeing in school, what they like about school, not like about school. And it has to be a parent and student survey and staff survey. So that would be another option.
Mr. Fisher.
So I would just add to that. I think what Dr. Dexter is saying in terms of being able to have another set of results that are from the same instrument as we finish up this school improvement cycle, I think is certainly a good place for us to be. I do think that we need to really take a good look at what we are using the data for, and obviously I haven't been here long enough to really do a deep dive into what all we're using it for. It is expensive. I mean, there's cost here that's, obviously if we had $50,000, we could, do something else with that. And if all we're getting out of it is checking a box, then we should be doing something else with it. But I do think we really need, and again, I think the one thing I would say is I've got enough input back from the people that have been here, that have been using it, that I feel like they've been pulling information from it that's been important in shaping decisions. I think we need to go back and take a hard look at that. And I think that's incumbent upon me as a district leader to make sure that we do that. But I do think that, again, this is probably a a good time for us to be able to, again, have that same information every time you change instruments. And we've seen this with the Nebraska State Education System. I don't think we have any good data out there on testing scores because they've changed the tests every other year. And again, I think if we have a cycle where we can really look at our data and know that we're looking at the same thing over a course of a number of years, that's the only way data is ever valuable. So again, I do think that what Mr. McFarland is saying in terms of us looking at the cost and really comparing the cost to what we're getting from it, this is probably an ideal time, for us to also do that as we close out this cycle.
And we do plan to have, June is when we present the panorama data, so that would be another opportunity to really have people share how do we use it, and bring in some building principals to hear directly from them. Teachers or social workers use it quite a bit to develop groups. So get some people that are hands-on using it to speak with you in June.
Thank you. Ms. Malden.
I know I was talking about like the statistics of how many schools are actually using it. What was that number of elementary schools that were using it? I know when he presented it last time, there was like, how many was that?
Across the United States? Yep. I can dig into it. I believe it was, Dr. Dahl?
In the information, it says 6,500 schools.
Okay, yeah, I've got it here, yeah.
Okay, so like when you guys were discussing that, and I know last time there's 6,500 compared to 65,000 elementary schools in the U.S. I mean, that's kind of low for a survey. When you were picking the survey, did you guys have like others in mind? And then that one just hit home that we needed that one?
It was the most user-friendly and least cost, and gave us everything we wanted. The disaggregation, the platform, it creates a graphs for you. It can disaggregate by school, by classroom. So those are some key points that pointed us to Panorama. And there's been quite a bit, that was back in 2015, and so there's been quite a bit developed since then.
Salvers?
So of those 65,000, those probably wouldn't all be public schools? Did you look up just public schools, or were those private too?
We went with what Panorama reported, but the districts that we worked with, Seattle, San Diego, East Coast schools, I don't believe we had any in Nebraska at the time.
Not the 6,500, but the 65,000 you were talking about?
That included public and private when I was looking at that.
And private schools probably don't have to jump through the same hoops that we would have to jump through. But it might be good to go forward to look at different companies that did this and do some kind of a comparison of what we can get from each company. Because I know some companies would do students or do staff, but then wouldn't do parents. And Panorama was the one that would do all three and have some usable data and still be less expensive than some of the other ones that were out there. I remember that presentation. I remember that discussion about that it was less expensive. And I know Dr. Dahl has referred to the data frequently when he has presented to us. But it would be good to hear from principals and teachers and social workers and those that are really getting their hands on it and what they use it for and how they find it helpful.
You bet.
And hopefully I can be convinced of that. I'm, once again, that's not talking about any staffing here whatsoever at Grand Island Public Schools. This is just simply the survey itself. So, Mr. Cloutier?
I will say one thing I've noticed is that it's often brought up when you guys are talking about this, that one of the major, things on the pro side of it is how many other schools use it for comparison data. I just sort of want to ask, is that pretty much the only thing that we're getting out of the $50,000 is data to compare with other schools? Because as far as actually analyzing the input data and stuff goes. I know that the Panorama template, just from having taken them every year, and also like when you view the output and stuff, isn't really that much different from like any sort of Microsoft or Google products. Obviously, the only downside of that is you can't, legally just, go around asking people for their confidential or surveys taken in confidentiality. So I want to ask, is the bulk of the cost regardless just going to be how many schools can we compare this data to? Is that pretty much what you're paying for? Is you're paying a company to have a big pool of data from other schools that may or may not be comparable, may or may not even be public, to GISH? Or I guess that's my question.
Sure, good question. And really, we looked at the reliability and validity of the questions. So you have the 65,000 schools, but they all use the same question. And then that gets vetted and looked at as, is this a good question? Is it not a good question? Are kids answering it consistently? So the development of the survey itself is a huge cost. The next big cost is being able to disaggregate it out by school, by grade, down to the classroom level, and then also by the different subgroups. And so that's very helpful. And then there's also a huge resource library of strategies, activities that teachers can use to say, okay, and one of the examples we had when we first did it, freshman teachers said they were disappointed that kids said, I don't think my teacher likes me, and some very specific, just simple, welcoming activities, get to know you activities that teachers don't have time to go out and find. They're right there on the platform. So, and you can spend hours looking for those resources, and they're developed by teachers. So that was a big impact. So those are the bigger costs. The fact that it was comparable across, we can look at rural, urban, high socioeconomic, low status. We can compare those and find a like kind of pattern of where we fit. And so that just gives us a benchmark, and that's important for our accreditation visit, is that did you benchmark your data against other schools? So that's part of it, but good question.
Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Dahl.
Just would ask to correct, we've talked about the numbers, and so I just went on their About page. So Panorama services 15 million students nationwide, 25,000 schools, so that's approximately a quarter it's a higher number of public schools than 65. It's in the 90s, I think. 2,000 districts and all 50 states. So when we signed up, maybe they had 46 states, but they've added all the states. So I think to your question, Zach, it's kind of we have comparable data, but it's highly generalizable to the United States. To the question of small sample sizes, every time we vote here, we have a very small sample size. Everything's a small sample size, but we really want to make sure that we're offering the best education we can, and principals don't have infinite time, and nor do social workers and counselors. They want to be able to identify a pain point, and so really participants who fill out these surveys help us to know where those pain points are so that we can provide better supports.
I think it would be valuable at this time. I would entertain a motion, if someone would so choose to approve it for 1 year and to take a look at it during the season to see if we have other options. Mr. Linsky.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the renewal purchase of Panorama Survey Tools for 1 year. This way we can look at different options for the future.
Second by Ms. Malden. Oh, I'm sorry. Discussion. Mr. Garcia Mendez.
Thank you. Would the price change if it's just for 1 year? If you go back to them and it's like, we just want it for 1 year.
This is just for 1 year.
All right,
Yeah,
sweet.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so the motion is to approve the purchase of the Panorama for a contract of 1 year. You may vote. Motion passes 4-3.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dexter. Item number 10, reports 10.1, Grand Island Public Schools Foundation Report, which Ms. Leap is not here today. Do you want to say anything more?
I think we covered pretty much all of
Okay,
it.
okay, all righty. Notification of upcoming meetings. Whoops, where are you? Come on. Okay, the next board meeting is Thursday, May 11th, 2023 at 5.